other parts, or basically that goes into the future as well. So we will look at things at how it basically fixes the first dimension, but never take into account the dimension into the future. So it's a process for organization, for government. It's a process of estimating or inferring how local policies, action, or changes influence the state of the neighboring universe. It also can be defined as an approach to problem solving. So systemic thinking is a good way of problem solving, both in individual organization, in fact, in the global arena as well. So it's a part of an overall system rather than reacting to present outcomes or events and potentially contributing to further development of undesired issue or problem. You know, in a way, our Malaysian, government is actually going through that. We have now come up with a systemic approach. First Malaysia, we call it One Malaysia. People first, performance now. And the reason why is that over the years, certain things that we thought is the right way to do, but perhaps, with changes in education, in technology, the environment is starting to change. So quickly, you have to adopt systemic thinking in terms of the different culture, different races that we have. So always, in fact, it is very much like blue ocean thinking. So those of you who practice blue ocean thinking or blue ocean strategy is exactly system thinking. You are looking at different parts, In blue ocean strategy, you have 7 pathway or 6 pathway. And what you're doing is that you're looking at different aspects of the industry that impacts the way that you're able to create customers and you're able to create new products. Outside the box thinking. So, moving on, the 2 examples. Let's look at the 2 ways of thinking. The linear thinking approach, or what we call the analysis way of problem solving, which we do a lot of that. And the difference between system thinking approach. In the linear thinking approach, we actually break problems into small parts. And this is quite typical, easy to resolve problems, because if it's too big, then it is all clouded. You cannot basically look at what is the thing that needs to be fixed. But there are disadvantages with that, because it isolates the problems into smaller parts and focus on the parts, but it cannot see the consequence of action as each problem has been isolated. You are taking components out. But as we say, in systems approach, we know that they are interrelated, they are interconnected. Sometimes you take the parts out. For example, often enough, and this is why I like, our Chinese or the Thai reflexology. The sole of your feet, represent the map of your body. You see that? It's a system approach. In other words, by massaging certain part of your sole, it affects different organs of your body. Right? So certain things is that, if you're just only treating, a lot of people that treat certain parts, but do not get the effect. Some people say acupuncture. I basically, deal with certain part, but it heals certain other parts as well. Not actually treating that particular spot, but it affects other parts of the body or the organ. So you can see that. An immediate short-term solution, it's very short-term solution, and it usually deals with simple system with few parts. But if you look at system thinking approach, ladies and gentlemen, it contemplates the holistic system, the whole picture, the forest rather than the trees. And you look at it, it takes a broader view and focus on the interaction, the relationship between each of the parts, seeing the big picture, and you can see the consequences of action throughout the system, an all interconnected system. You see, the problem here, which I'll talk a little bit about global warming, is the same thing. We have been looking at industrial growth, but not realizing that it actually affects the whole economy, the whole world. So, improvement throughout the whole system produce longer-term solution, and it's usually dealing with complex system with multiple parts. So, the approach of system thinking is fundamentally different from the traditional form of analysis, which we are trained to do. We are able to fix problems very quickly by taking out, some of the parts, basically reducing the parts and then solving the problems. And sometimes our schooling system also teaches us to do that. In other school education system, they are not doing that anymore. They are thinking basically, getting them to think. Let me use this as an example. I lived in Australia for many years. And I see that in my children. Let me just illustrate an example. I was flying off for a board meeting, and I was running, short of time. It's a very urgent assignment. I had 12 reports to the board of directors that I need to present, I need to prepare. So my young daughter of, at that time, I think she would have been about 12 or 13. And she is just, she was born in Australia, educated in Australia. And I said, darling, I'm in a hurry. I need to rush off. I need this report bound. I need this report bound so that I can present to my board of directors. So she has just finished a project at school, and she asked me, she said, Dad, now, are these reports for important people? I said, yes, they are very important. These are my bosses. These are the board of directors. I need to, make an impression on them. He said, okay. Now, these are important people. That means that, you will want to, make an impression of them. All right, Dad? Okay, we have just finished a project. Now, there are 4 ways of doing it. You can actually just use what we call a stapler bind. You can actually use also what we call a plastic spinal bind. You can also use a comb bind, which is a plastic, but you can also use a metal spiral bound. But if this is very important, and it is based, it is also presented to the board of directors, perhaps maybe you will want the best outcome. So I will run down to the shop, which is like the Kinko shop, right? An office shop, and she came back with 12 really well-bounded report. You see, in many cases, when you are doing linear thinking, if I just ask you to bind it, you will just go to stapler. The fastest way you can do it, that is obviously an outcome as well. But it is not the best outcome. So in systems thinking, people need to, and it's part of knowledge management, it's creating context. Why are you doing this? For what purpose? So I got restless because in our culture, we have this way, the Chinese teaching is that children must be seen and not heard. You sit there and you don't ask any question. But in Australia, their education system is to teach them how to think. So the art of questioning is very important. You see, some of our education system, we don't teach people how to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, you don't learn. You don't gather knowledge if you are not able to ask questions. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. It's just that I do not know it. You may know it, and I may be embarrassed to ask it, but I do not know the answer. So I always tell my students, I say, look here, your question could be provide the best solution that nobody dared to ask here. We get caught in our own paradigm, ladies and gentlemen. We feel that it would be embarrassing to ask a question that everybody should know. Not true. Sometimes I have found in innovation and discovery, they say, from the mouth of babes comes gem. We ask an innocent question which leads to the best solution that nobody have ever thought of. Because we get locked into the box, we get locked into our own paradigm. So knowledge management, the art of knowledge management is to ask good questions respectfully. The problem with our society sometimes is that when we ask questions, it's like wanting to fight already. Come, you're challenging me. It's not. So sometimes there is a situation in organization, it's not who is right or who is wrong, but what is the right thing by the organization. So we need to basically, in knowledge management environment, we must ask, the 2 things that is very important, to tell stories and to ask questions. Right? So I just want to share that. So that's systemic thinking. I was losing patience. Darling, why are you asking me so many questions? I'm in a hurry. I need to catch the plane. But she produced a result much better than for me. All right? So sometimes, the listening is a part of us also. In management, we don't listen. In our career, we always bark orders, the command and control. There is a time now in knowledge management is that the greatest culture of knowledge management is to listen. Because a lot of people have great ideas. We just do not give them the opportunity to share their ideas. Okay, let me move on then. Systems thinking is a discipline and competitive factor in solving individual organization. I believe in that. In individual mastery, consistently we must adopt that system thinking. Like my daughter, what she did. To be able to ask questions and get the best performance or best result that we can achieve. The 21st century, ladies and gentlemen, has witnessed the development of the system paradigm and different sphere of system knowledge. Hence, system thinking today is imperative, more so in our total environment, which I will share with you. And also with this in mind, I think tomorrow problems is going to be more complex. And it doesn't basically allow us to think linearly now. We cannot basically fix a problem because you have that danger of created unintended consequences. And I think, who was that who said the inconvenient truth? Right? The concept of the inconvenient truth. Okay, then how do we do that? How do we practice it? There are a number of ways we do that when we apply system thinking. We identify solutions that address problem in the system. So look at the holistic approach to it. So improvement in the whole system, holistic and integrated approach towards solving problems. Recognize the interaction and relationship within the system. So the relationship is very important. Often enough, we do not focus on the relationship, and we end up with a lot more problem. I always say this, earlier in my career as a management consultant, one of my boss told me that the art of getting, things done in a proper way is that don't be seduced by the content. Don't be seduced by the content. Watch the process. The content will come out if you watch the process properly. Sometimes the answers is there, but if you do not watch the process, the answers will manifest itself. You know why? You destroy the answer by the solution by not watching the process. So the process is very important. How we deal with people, the relationship issue is very important as well. So this is some of the things. Then seeing the whole picture, we have already said that, and the future, and seeing the interconnectedness as well. Then we also identify solution that addresses the ever-changing problems within the different subsystems. The idea is now we have to basically look into the future because there are a lot of emerging industry that we cannot see today. Look at the handphone, ladies and gentlemen. 10 years ago, if I were to ask you to put up your hand, anybody of you, who have handphone, can you put up your hand? There would be very few people who will put up their hand. But today, if I ask you the reverse, anyone without the handphone, put up their hand. You will see everybody, put their hand down because all of us actually have a mobile. So the concept here is that, we cannot do without that. The technology has changed. And the art of systems thinking also is to look at future management. What do you think are the emerging trends that will appear on the horizon that you need to do something now in order to capture? Right? So in many cases, it's about reading patterns. Google does this. Why does Google give you free access to that? Because they are collecting data from you. All your behavior, your interaction is allowing them to map intelligence within their system. So they can see consumer behavior, by drawing the pattern. They're looking at the whole. So they are applying systems thinking to the way that they approach their business and their business model as well. Okay, let me talk about, I think we should do that. How many of you are doing KM or in the area of KM and system thinking? Yeah, I think there are quite a few people in KM using it. So learning organization is very key to systemic thinking, right? The fifth discipline that is espoused by Professor Senghi is very key to systems thinking. First of all, I mentioned before, you look at personal mastery. If you continue to develop yourself, the concept is that if you are good, then your team becomes good. So the idea is to get every one of your team members to be good. Because in an organization, ladies and gentlemen, this concept, you are as strong as your weakest link. You can have 9 champions and you have 1 weak team player, it doesn't really matter. Your organization gets evaluated at the lowest level of competency within that. So you can have 9 champions and 1 weak person, so your organization level is measured at the weakest level. So here, in systemic thinking is that everybody has to achieve mastery. No choice. It's basically a culture of excellence, not mediocrity. So everybody have to strive for excellence in terms of achieving the highest level so the team becomes very strong. And the problem in organizations, sometimes